I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast, Debt, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, presented by Fidelity Investments and sponsored by your employer. I'm Jean Chatzky. I'm a personal finance journalist and author of the new book, Age Proof, Living Longer Without Running Out of Money or Breaking a Hip, as well as the book, Money Rules, and I'll be guiding you through today's program. Just the word debt, it's enough to make eyebrows rise, and they should, because as a country, we've got more debt than we've had in a long time. But not all debt is bad. When managed correctly, it can help you free up other resources to invest for your future, or for things like cars, homes, or education. So today, we have 3 highly skilled women on the topic of debt. Fidelity experts Asha Shrikantaya, Onisa Tribes, and Megan Murphy. They'll walk us through the best strategies when it comes to handling student loan debt, credit card debt, and mortgage and home equity debt. Together, we'll cover the 6 things everyone should know about debt, answers to your top 5 questions about credit cards, student loans, and mortgages, smart ways to use debt to help improve your credit score, capitalize on credit card rewards, and make the most of your home equity. And by the end of this session, you'll have tangible solutions to help you better deal with your debt. So let's get started. Just about everyone has accumulated debt at some point in his or her life. 1/3 of people, even those making $100,000, have credit card debt. 1/4 of them are struggling to pay it down. 1/3 of Fidelity's retirement customers have student loan debt. But the thing we need to keep in mind is that not all debt is bad. There are 3 ways to look at debt. Generally, there's good debt, like a mortgage you can manage or reasonable student loan debt. There may be bad debt, like high interest rate credit cards. And then there's ugly debt. That's the stuff that's a chronic problem that has the potential to derail your life. That's the debt that keeps you up at night and prevents you from building a stable financial future. Keep in mind, with any debt, it's about putting yourself in a position to make financially responsible, not irresponsible decisions. That's key. What's confusing about debt is that the boundaries between good, bad, and ugly, they blur on an all too frequent basis. The thing to realize about debt of all kinds is that when you borrow, you're making a decision not just for today, but also for tomorrow. What will that extra car payment, for example, mean in terms of opportunities you'll have to say no to down the road because the money isn't there? We'll talk about different kinds of debt throughout this webcast, but first, let's talk about student loan debt. Here's a quick video overview of what we, as a country, are facing.
You've heard it a million times. College is getting more expensive. And that gets even clearer when we look at the numbers. Right now, 44.2 million people have student loan debt. And the average student graduates with $37,000 in debt, which is up 6% from last year. The percent of people over 50 still paying back their student loans is increasing. Research shows people are delaying major life events, like purchasing a car or home and saving for retirement because of their student debt. All the more reason why the sooner you tackle that debt, the sooner you can do the things you want to do.
The good news about dealing with student loans is you can make it a lot less painful with some smart strategies both before you borrow and upon repayment. Here to talk through all of that with me is Asha Shrikantaya. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So I know you've been doing a lot of work over the last year in this area. Tell us about what's going on with your team.
For over a year now, I've been working very closely with a team of people who are looking to develop solutions for people who currently have student loans. And I can say that the first thing that we've found that people should really do is that if you have student loans, try to get a handle on your current loan situation. So a lot of people end up graduating with multiple loans, different servicers, some are federal, some are private, different interest rates.
Yeah, it's a whole portfolio.
It really is, and it's a lot. And I think a lot of people find it to be daunting to wrap your head around all the loan debt that you have and where it all is. And if you feel that way, you're not alone. So just know that, and then also know that there are some online tools out there to help you, like the student debt tool that our team at Fidelity has been working on.
So let's start by focusing on repayment. You've got federal loans. What's your first move?
First things first, think about what matters most to you. So let's say, for instance, that you are looking to lower your monthly payment. If you have federal loans, like you said, one of the best ways to maybe do that would be to get on a federal repayment plan that helps you manage your monthly payments each month. So, like for instance, there are income-driven repayment plans. One in particular is called Repay.
That's the newest one.
That's the newest one. And the way that it works is that your monthly payments are pegged at 10% of your household annual income. And so that can be a really great strategy for people who are looking to pay less each month towards their student loans, either because they're strapped because their monthly payments are so high, or just because they want to free up some cash to put towards other things.
There are a lot of different repayment plans that the federal government has.
Yeah.
So what do you need to know about them before you make a move? Because you can end up paying more interest overall if you go with one of these things.
Absolutely. So typically the trade-off is if you're paying less each month, it means that you're paying for a longer amount of time, and then that usually means that you're paying more over the lifetime of your loan. Now, there are a few exceptions to that, and sometimes these income-driven plans can provide that. A program like Repay, like I mentioned earlier, if you have undergraduate loans after 20 years, or if you have grad school loans after 25 years, you can get the remainder of your loan balance forgiven.
Wiped away.
Wiped away, except that you will have to pay taxes on that amount after that period. So you have to know that, this could be really great for you if you have a high debt amount compared to your income, but there typically is some sort of trade-off there.
And what about other options, not going through the federal government? Let's talk a little bit about private refinancing and how that works in comparison.
Absolutely. So private refinancing is relatively new in the student loan space.
Yeah, for years you could not refinance federal student loans privately.
Exactly. It's really only in the last 4 or so years that this has become a real thing in the market. And for some people, it's a great option. When you privately refinance your loans, you could lower your monthly payment, you could lower your interest rate, you could lower your lifetime cost, but you need to know what the trade-offs are. So if you are privately refinancing your federal loans, you're basically taking on a new private loan to pay off all of your federal loans. In other words, your loan is now private. So what that means is you don't have access to any of the federal benefits anymore.
So if you want forbearance, if you want deferment, and let's just explain what those things are.
Sure.
You have lost the option to do that.
Yep, exactly. Forbearance is a particularly generous benefit from the federal government, typically more generous from the federal government than any private lenders, where you can really put your payments on hold if you reach financial distress of any sort. Deferment is a really great option for people who are thinking about going back to school. You can defer your loans for the period of time that you're in school, or any of these income-driven plans that I mentioned earlier. Those are all really specific to people who have federal loans. So if you privately refinance any of your loans, you've lost your option to enroll in any of those.
What options are available for parents? Let's say the parents borrowed on behalf of their students in the form of PLUS loans or in the form of private loans. What options do they have for repaying?
So all parents with loans, whether they're federal PLUS loans or private loans, you can privately refinance parent loans. So that might be a good option. If you're looking to stay within the federal repayment system, the only option that's available to you as a parent is income contingent repayment.
I know, more lingo.
More lingo. The way that this one works is instead of, like earlier I was talking about Repay, where you're payments are at 10% of your household income. On income contingent repayment, your payments are at 20% of your household annual income. So
I guess the government assumes that by the time you're a parent, you might have a higher household income.
I think that's the assumption.
That's probably why they structure it that way.
Yeah.
So public service loan forgiveness is another option, and it's one of those where people sometimes believe it's too good to be true.
Yeah.
I know it generally applies to people who are working in helping professions.
Correct.
How does it work?
If you work for a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, if you work for any government organization, federal, state, local, tribal, if you're a public school teacher, public service loan forgiveness can be such a good option for you. And if it sounds like it's too good to be true, believe it, it is true. So the thing to know here and how it works, basically, the federal government is offering a thank you to people who spend their lives in public service. What that means is for your federal loans, if you work full-time and keep up with all of your monthly payments over the course of 120 payments, or roughly 10 years, the federal government will then wipe out or forgive the remaining loan balance after that 10-year period. And the best part about that is that it's tax-free for people who are in the public service loan forgiveness program.
And the 120 payments, they do or don't have to be sequential?
They don't have to be sequential. So if you, let's say if you miss a payment, you can kind of pick back up where you left off, but you do need to make the full 120 qualifying payments. The thing that's really important to keep in mind here, though, is that not all repayment plans are considered qualifying. So for instance, if your loans are on what's called a graduated repayment plan, or if your loans are on an extended repayment plan where your term is 25 or 30 years, those are not considered qualifying payments towards public service loan forgiveness. So just look into it, make sure that you're on the right repayment plan to really take advantage of this great benefit.
You mentioned the new Fidelity student debt tool. Tell me a little bit more about how that works.
Sure. So my team's been hard at work actually putting together this new tool from Fidelity, the student debt tool, specifically for people who are repaying their student loans. So what we do is we ask people to input their loan information and then give us a couple of quick answers about themselves, and then we show them what their current loan picture looks like. We break that down into plain English.
That's good.
Yeah, which is really good, we found. And then we walk people through their different repayment options. So we'll actually model out, hey, if you were to go on repay, what's your new monthly payment? If you were to privately refinance your loans, what would be your new lifetime cost at various interest rates? Even if you're looking to maybe pay a couple extra dollars each month towards your student loans, we actually show you the most efficient ways to do that through an extra payment calculator.
And this is available to anybody?
It is. It's available online to anybody. You don't even have to be a Fidelity customer to take advantage of it.
And where do we find it?
So there's a link that's available in the download section of this webcast.
Okay, great. We've gathered some questions from viewers, and we have one coming from Chantel at Houston Methodist Research Institute. She asks, how do you determine how much you should safely borrow for student loans?
That is a great question. So the general industry rule of thumb is that you don't want to take out more than you expect to earn in your first year out of school. So if you, let's say, go to school and you think that you're going to become a software engineer, you might be able to take out a different amount than if you were, I don't know, let's say
a journalist.
Exactly.
A journalist. Yeah. Okay. All right. I get how that works. Another question. This one is from Mari at Dun & Bradstreet, and she says, does it make sense to pay off a child's student loan with a parent's home equity line? And I'll just add the flip side to that question, which is, if my children took out a loan, should I pay it back? And I would say, as far as the answer to the first question, that you have to be really careful. This is just something that we learned during the housing crisis.
Right.
Of course, you want to compare the interest rates, because the interest rates are your cost of funds in each case. And a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan, particularly because it's tax deductible, can be inexpensive money. But borrowing from your home, using it as an ATM, gets dodgy if you're not sure when you're going to be able to pay that money back. How about from your perspective? Should a parent repay a child's loans?
Yeah, you know, different families approach this differently. So one of the things that we've seen is that some families will use, even just by giving their student or their child one loan to take responsibility of, they'll use that as a way to actually build strong financial habits and to grow financial literacy in your child. So it might actually be a really good thing to put the responsibility of even just one loan on your child.
I also think it's helpful to give your kids a stake in the game.
Right.
Preferably, they should know this going in, that they are going to be responsible for at least some of the repayment. So many kids these days are on the 5 or 6 year plan rather than the 4-year plan. As a parent, that gets very expensive very quickly.
Right.
So having them participate is a way to just, help further that understanding, as you said.
Exactly.
When it comes to actually saving for college, and I'd love your thoughts on this as well, my advice has always been look at a 529 plan.
Yep, I think at Fidelity we would say the same thing. That's a great option.
Well, and it allows you to put aside more money than putting money into a Coverdell education savings account.
Yep.
The limits are higher. There's some state tax benefits in many cases for making those contributions. So that's a nice way to look at it. And for grandparents who are thinking that they'd like to help, the catchy part here is that if you want to qualify for as much financial aid as possible, you don't want to have assets in your student's name other than in a designated education savings account. Because if you've got them in a uniform gift to minors account or simply in the children's name, that can really get in the way of financial aid eligibility.
Exactly.
Are there other ways that you would suggest that parents and grandparents get into the picture?
So I think that a 529 is a really great option. And then I would say that back to your point earlier about the conversation, I think that one of the things that we've found is that the game has changed so dramatically. Even in the past 15 years, tuition costs have doubled, and a lot of parents are just not equipped to deal with the type of financial burden that it is. And yet, I think that there's a lot of discomfort in having open conversations as a family about how much school is going to cost and what your plan is together as a family. So I would say the more that families can really start to talk about this, the better off everyone will be.
I totally agree. Asha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jean. This has been great.
My pleasure. And now we're going to move on to something nearly all of us have. Credit card debt. We're going to take a look at some statistics about credit card debt, and when we come back, we'll be speaking with Onisa Tribes about the impact that debt has on our lives.
We all know that credit card debt can be a problem, but check this out. The average American with credit cards has 3.7 cards, and 42% of credit card accounts carry a balance month to month. When you consider that the average debt for these cards is over $7,000, that's a lot to pay off. A little something to think about next time you reach for your credit card.
Cash has quickly fallen out of favor. Debit cards are now America's favorite go-to form of payment, representing 43% of all payments. Credit cards come in second at 35%, followed by cash at 9%, and PayPal and other alternative payment methods at about 3%. Debit cards are a good strategy because you can't spend money you don't have, which, as you know, is a key difference from credit cards. I didn't even have a credit card until I got my first job after college. I didn't trust myself to have one during college because I figured I'd use it irresponsibly. And that turned out to be fairly good thinking. I wasn't great with my first credit card until I got on the bandwagon about 2 or 3 years after I started into the workforce. Here to talk with us about all things credit cards is Onisa Tribes. She's a vice president and a manager of a Fidelity branch in Texas. Welcome, Onisa.
Hi, Jean. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's just jump right on in. How do you know when you should be saving, when you should be investing, and when you should be using extra money to pay off debt?
That's a great question, Jean. It's all about returns. The return on your investments or your savings account, is it greater than the interest that you might have on a credit card? If so, then yes, let's save and invest. If it's the other way around, you're going to want to put money towards your credit card.
So when we're looking at high interest rate credit card debt at 24-25%, that tends to be the right move to make. What about if you're balancing it against a 401k or other work-based retirement plan with a match?
If you're talking about returns on a 401k or retirement account with the employer match, you're going to be in a much better position taking advantage of the retirement account versus paying off high interest credit card debt.
And you're saying that because if you've got matching dollars in the picture in your 401k or your 403b, essentially you're looking at a guaranteed, typically extra 25 or 50% return on your money, depending on what that match is. And that trumps the return that you'd get on the interest rate from paying off that credit card debt.
That's correct. Better off putting it in retirement.
Okay. What about emergencies? What if you don't even have an emergency cushion to begin with?
You need an emergency cushion. You need to be saving at least 3 to 6 months worth of essential expenses. That's what Fidelity would recommend. Leaving money in savings outside of that emergency fund when you have high interest rate credit card debt rarely makes sense. Fidelity's research shows that half of our financial wellness users have credit card debt, and that is the same number across all generations. The perception is that credit card debt is just a normal way of life. 56% of people do not pay off their credit card on a monthly basis. So there's people out there that need information and help.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can get yourself paying those credit cards back so that you're just getting the benefits of your credit cards without having to pay the interest, that's what you want to aim for.
Yes.
But before we get to rewards, let's talk about the best way to actually pay those credit cards off. There are two methods that are widely recommended. There's the avalanche and there's the snowball. What do you like?
Did it just get cold in here?
A little cold in here.
Yes, it did. Well, they both have merit. The avalanche is an approach where you take the highest interest rate and attack that first. That financially makes sense. Then the snowball is where you're going to look at the smaller balances and pay those off where you're having a financial, emotional win and you'll feel good about that. Then there's the blizzard.
What's the blizzard?
The blizzard is an approach that I actually took when my husband and I first got married and out of college. We consolidated all of our credit card debt to find that we had over $15,000 in credit card debt.
Wow.
Unlike you, I might not have been as responsible in college when I took out those credit cards.
It's okay. I was plenty irresponsible after college and I learned my lesson. So how did you manage paying them back?
Well, you know, when you're out of college, your first job isn't going to be a high-paying one. So we looked at starting off with the snowball effect. We took the smaller balances first and attacked those. Felt good emotionally about what we were doing. And as our income increased, we then went ahead and switched over to the avalanche where we could attack the ones that made financial sense.
So the blizzard essentially gives you a little bit up front and then the financial payoff on the back end.
That's correct. And as far as paying down debt and where to use your next dollar, you want to pay it down. However, if you have an employer plan where you're contributing to a 401k or a 403b, you want to take advantage of that employer match. Matching dollars is free money. Then pay your high interest rate credit cards. And we talked about savings accounts and an emergency fund. You can build an emergency fund little by little and feel good about that.
Yeah, and if you do it automatically, it makes it a lot easier. Just have the money moved automatically into a savings account, paycheck after paycheck, and you will eventually get the job done.
You don't even see it.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit about credit card rewards. There are so many rewards out there these days. It seems like they're getting richer and richer. How do you know which is the right type of reward for you?
Yes, there's definitely lots of rewards out there. That's one of my favorite topics. Now, airline miles or airline cards, you're going to get more bang for your buck, dollar for dollar, versus the cash rewards. However, if you're not redeeming your airline miles, if you're not a traveler, an airline mile card might not make sense to you. Now, if you go with cash rewards, you can use those in multiple places. In my particular case, I do have a card where we use the cash rewards towards college savings that will eventually help out when my two sons go to college.
And we use travel rewards. We rack up frequent flyer miles. We use them to take a really nice trip once a year, sometimes twice a year, depending on how much traveling and spending we're doing. But the idea that you could be racking up these frequent flyer miles and never go anywhere, that doesn't make sense to me. One of the questions that I often hear is whether or not it's worth getting an additional card just for the miles. And my take on that is that you always have to be a little bit careful. I mean, yes, the miles are out there in big fat rewards like never before, but a lot of these mileage cards come with high fees. You have to make sure that you're earning more in rewards than you're actually paying for the card itself. And you have to use all of this pool of information before figuring out what card is best for you, and take your own credit score into consideration. If you're out there applying for cards upon cards upon cards, that can actually take your score down a little bit. We have a question from Jacqueline, and Jacqueline's at the American Heart Association. She wants to know the flip side of that, whether it actually hurts your credit score to close a card that you're not using.
Well, Jacqueline, you better be careful. Closing a card could damage your credit score. Anything that you've had with a long time history or a high credit limit and you close that down kind of reduces or removes the history, especially when you're opening a new one. And you definitely don't want to be doing any of those types of changes 6 to 12 months before applying for a mortgage or a car loan.
So let's talk a little bit about those folks who are perhaps getting a little in over their head in credit card debt. What are the warning signs that you could be on the precipice of a problem?
There are 3 warning signs to look for. The first one is your debt going up and increasing month over month? Are you seeing that number grow instead of come down?
Okay.
The second one is, are you moving balances from card to card and moving them around versus paying them off?
So you're playing a little credit card roulette just to keep yourself afloat?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely in over your head.
And the third?
The third one is, if you're worried about your credit card debt, then you probably have too much debt. Fidelity's financial wellness survey shows that certain types of debt add stress and actually make you feel bad. Having medical expenses or a loan can make you feel worse than a mortgage or a car loan, which has little to no impact on your feelings.
I can totally understand why that is, because a car loan, the mortgage, that sort of asset is taking you in the right direction. At least it's taking you somewhere.
If you find yourself in this scenario, there are things that can help. There's nonprofit credit counseling, where it's National Foundation for Credit Counseling can help, or the Fidelity My Money Checkup Tool.
While we're on the topic of mortgages, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about home equity and mortgages in general. The market for home equity loans and lines of credit, sometimes called HELOCs, is heating up. Now, these are both forms of second mortgages. We know that consumers borrowed billions from their homes, and nearly 1 million homeowners opened HELOCs over the past year. Strong price appreciation in real estate is driving this, as is the fact that you can borrow less expensively from your homes than by, say, using student loans or credit cards. Job growth and consumer confidence are also both on the rise, and they too are contributing factors. We've got a question from Melissa from Texas Children's Hospital. She'd like to know if taking a home equity loan to pay off debt is a smart thing to do. And I would just say that you got to be careful when you start drawing on home equity for uses other than improving your home. Home equity loans are traditionally used when you need a big lump sum to do a major renovation. Home equity lines of credit, because you draw on them more like a checkbook, are often used for renovation projects that just take place over time so that you don't have to pay interest on the whole sum up front. But I think, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, that home equity lines of credit can also make pretty good back pocket emergency cushions.
Yes, they definitely can make a good emergency cushion. However, there's a trick, Jean. You want to have that in place before certain types of emergency, like a job loss.
Right, because if you lose your job, nobody's going to give you a home equity line of credit.
Right.
So you want to apply for it and have it even if you're not using it.
Correct. And you want to use it sparingly because it's still borrowing against your home. However, using a home equity line of credit can be better to paying off college expenses, an auto loan, or even consolidating credit card debt.
And it's a matter of the interest rate, once again.
Yes. Be aware, though, you need to repay your home equity loan. A third of folks who took advantage of them in the Great Recession to consolidate credit card debt found themselves running that credit card debt right back up. And then they are in a position where they not only owed on the home equity line of credit, they also owed a whole new set of credit card debt.
So they were in a hole that was twice as deep.
Twice as deep.
All right, you have to be very careful. I'm understanding you here. Lindsay from Jackson National Asset Management wants to know if it's good or bad to pay off your mortgage as quickly as possible.
Ideally, you'd like to have your mortgage paid off before you retire or before you're on a fixed income. However, more seniors are going into retirement carrying a mortgage.
Than ever before.
And that's going to be very difficult to manage when your income is depleting and you're still carrying a mortgage note. So you want to eliminate your mortgage before your income slows down measurably. Or you're going to have to downsize your expenses, and that's not always fun.
Well, it's something that you have to plan for. Right? And so if you know that you refinanced a home only 15 or 20 years out of retirement, you may want to get yourself on a plan to repay that loan faster or take out a different kind of a loan.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. All good things, important things to think about. What about the question of whether I should pay off my mortgage or put more into my investments, specifically my retirement plans like my 401k or my 403b?
Again, that's going to be about the returns. Now, the return from paying off your mortgage, is it equal to the interest rate minus the tax deduction, assuming you itemize around 3% for most? Or by investing in a diversified portfolio over a long term, potentially the return will be greater. Mm-hmm. So if you are also taking advantage of employer matches in your 401k or your 403b, you're way ahead of the game. Once you're on track with those things, making an extra payment a year can drop a 30-year note to 24 years.
It shaves 6 years off the life of that loan.
Just one extra payment a year.
That's substantial.
A good way to do that is by dividing out that payment over 12 months and adding that on each month. And then so you don't even really notice that you're making an extra payment.
Oh, that's a handy trick. I like that. I'm often asked about reverse mortgages as well, so I want to just take a minute and explain how those work and the pros and cons. Default rates on reverse mortgages are high. They're about 10%. So it's really critical to understand how these loans work, what the terms of these loans are, and to have a high confidence level that you can adhere to those terms, including paying the property taxes, insurance, and maintaining the home. They're also fairly expensive. Now, all of that said, in the past few years, we've seen changes in the marketplace for reverse mortgages that have improved the products overall and have made them a pretty good deal for some people. A little background. Reverse mortgages or home equity conversion mortgages, they're called HECM loans. They offer a way for people to borrow the equity in their homes while they still live in them. The loan doesn't have to be paid back until the homeowner dies or has been moved out of the house for a year or longer. To qualify, you have to be 62 or older. You have to have a substantial amount of equity in your home. And again, you have to be able to pay the taxes and the insurance on an ongoing basis. How much you're able to pull out of your home, it's based on 3 things. The amount of equity you have in your home, the more you have, the more you can take. Your age, the older you are, the more you can take because the lender has to assume it won't get its money back until you die. And interest rates. And you can take the money in 3 different ways. You can take it as an annuity or a paycheck. You can take it as a lump sum, or you can take it as a line of credit that you can draw on if need be. This line of credit is a crafty way to cover your day-to-day expenses without chipping away at your retirement account. If you've got assets that are down that you don't want to sell to pay your day-to-day bills, you can draw on that line of credit and repay it once the value of those assets goes back up. In other words, it too can be used as a back pocket emergency cushion.
Yes. And your last point, Jean, about the day-to-day expenses is key. There's a lot of options out there for help, and meeting with a financial representative, Fidelity can help you with an overall plan.
That's great advice always. I think especially as you're heading into a transitional time,
yes,
like retirement
and finding those income needs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And now on to our last topic for today, the do's and don'ts of borrowing. When we return, we'll talk with our guest, Megan Murphy.
what's the impact on your investments if you take a loan from your 401k? Think of it this way. Let's say you have $100,000 in your retirement account, and you take out a loan for $25,000. If the market goes up, now you're only earning returns on $75,000. Over time, that's a lot of compounding interest you're missing out on, which means that's a lot of money you'd be missing out on by retirement. And that's not good. So unless you absolutely have to, you probably want to shy away from taking a loan against your 401k or 403b.
I'm pleased to introduce our last expert today. Megan Murphy is a director of thought leadership at Fidelity. Welcome, Megan.
Thanks, Jane. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. So let's talk about borrowing. These days, you can borrow in various ways from various sources. What's your advice to somebody who's thinking of taking out a loan?
I would say there's two things to keep in mind before you even take a loan. One, how much debt can you really afford to take on? We would say, and the industry uses a guideline, you shouldn't be paying more than 36% of your gross income towards your debt.
Overall debt.
Overall debt. Now, for housing, your housing debt shouldn't exceed 30% of your gross income. So doing the math a little bit before you even take that loan and understanding where you stand financially is very important. I would stress here that 36% is the maximum. Our research has actually found that people who are paying more than 20% of their gross income towards debt could probably use some help in setting up a plan to pay down debt.
People who are paying more than 20% of their towards all their overall debts, or does that include housing?
Includes housing, should probably put a plan in place to make sure that they're making their debt payments adequately each month.
Got it. Okay. You also want to be asking yourself, do you have a good credit score? Or, in other words, are you an attractive borrower? One of the important things to understand about having a good or excellent credit score is that it means being able to borrow at attractive interest rates. But it also means more than that. Having good credit gets you a better deal on homeowners and auto insurance. It means you're able to rent an apartment. Some employers even look at your credit history before deciding to hire you. One of the 3 major credit bureaus has a new tagline that says, "Credit isn't just a score, it's a skill." I think that's absolutely right on. So if you're not happy with where your score is right now, you can move it in the right direction with 12 months or so of good behavior. FICO credit scores, and these are, by the way, the ones that are most looked at by lenders, they generally break down like this. An excellent score ranges from 800 to 850. 20% of people have scores that high. Very good scores range from 740 to 799. 18% of people fall into that category. Good scores range from 670 to 739. You're looking at 22% of people there. Fair scores range from 580 to 669. That's 20% of people. And poor scores is anybody who's got below a 580, and 17% of people fall into that range. If your score isn't where you want it to be, Megan, what do you do?
There are 5 tips we can give for improving your credit score. And like you mentioned, you can improve your credit score by practicing these over about a year's time frame. First, pay your bills on time. This is 35% of your credit score. And
so it's huge.
Huge. And even just a few months of missed payments can make a big difference. The second piece I would say is don't use more than 10 to 30% of your available credit. That's across all of your credit cards and on each one individually. Third, and this is where many people get hung up, it's very tempting sometimes, but don't take out new credit cards that you don't need. You're purchasing something, you get up to the register and they say,
"Can I give you this card and give you 15% off?"
15, 20, I was last week, 40% off. And at the time, that sounds like a great deal. But oftentimes the savings you have at the register that day is offset by any interest rate that you may occur on that credit card. So be careful that you don't get tied into that. Fourth, I would say keep a mix of credits. It's not just about paying one credit card on time, but if you have student loans or a mortgage or an auto loan, make sure that you're covering all of those and making the payments. And lastly, something we all strive for in life, long relationships. Don't close out that credit card just because you aren't using it. The longest relationships when it comes to credit are the ones that do the most for your credit score.
Those are really helpful guidelines. Now that we talked a little bit about what you need to think about before you borrow, let's talk about where you can borrow, specifically from your retirement plans. We're actually starting to see a decrease in the number of people taking loans from their retirement plans, and I think there's a simple explanation for this. Pension plans are largely gone. Workers have come to terms with the fact that their 401ks or 403bs are their primary way to finance retirement. And they know that without a pension to fall back on, they have to take saving for retirement in those accounts very seriously. So Megan, my question to you is, what should people consider before taking a loan from their retirement plan?
Well, a loan from a retirement plan needs serious consideration. The first thing I would say is once you take that money out of the plan, it's not invested, it's not working and growing for you along with the market. Second is this is a bill that you have to pay every month. The repayment is automatically deducted from your paycheck, but that is less take-home pay on the other end. So you need to make sure that you can still meet all of your other financial obligations. And lastly, we try to help people to understand the interest that you repay on that loan. Even though you repay it to yourself, it's taxed twice. It's taxed because you pay the loan back with after-tax dollars, and then it's taxed again when you're using that money in retirement.
I want to stop you there for just a second. You say you pay the interest back to yourself. Mm-hmm. People often use that as a rationale for borrowing from their retirement plans. That, oh, well, I'm paying the interest back to myself, so this is an okay thing to do. Is it really?
Well, you have to look at the whole cost of the loan. So the money is out of the market. The interest is taxed twice. And a few other things that we try to help people to understand is if you leave your employer while you still have a balance on that loan, in most cases, you have to pay the balance on the loan back within 60 to 90 days. And if you're not in a position to do that, you could be at risk for defaults and incurring tax penalties along the way.
So life happens. We've got medical emergencies. We've got credit card consolidations. Is there ever a good reason for taking out a loan from your 401k or 403b?
So the answer is it depends. We would never want someone to forego medical treatment because they couldn't afford it. We just encourage people to really think through the cost of the loan. And in situations like that, like you said, life happens. The roof leaks, the furnace goes, you need a medical procedure. We encourage everyone from the time you have your first job, start building your emergency fund. Even saving just a little bit each pay period can add up over time. One tip that I like to use is put that money in an account that you can't easily touch.
I totally agree.
No ATM card. I'm old school. I still have a passbook for my emergency fund. Yep. If I want it, I actually have to drive to the bank to get the money.
What about the idea of using a 401k, 403b loan to avoid paying PMI or private mortgage insurance?
So that is a question that often comes up. Unless you can put 20% down on your home, in the vast majority of cases, you have to pay PMI. This is insurance to protect the lender, not the buyer. So again, we encourage people, do all of the math. What is the true cost of the loan from your retirement plan? What are the pros and cons of that loan? And what are the pros and cons associated with private mortgage insurance? One thing I would note is there are calculators out there on our websites to help people understand the true cost of a loan, both today and the impact it can have on retirement.
And it's really helpful to get this down to a dollar level so that you can wrap your brain around it.
Exactly.
Megan, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Jean.
We've discussed a lot today, so let's review. Debt is neither good, bad, nor ugly. It's a tool that, when used wisely, can help you get where you want to go in life, and when not used wisely, can get you in trouble. When it comes to student loans, you want to limit borrowing to the amount that you expect to earn during your first year out of school. Fidelity's new student loan tool can help you figure out the best way to repay what you've borrowed. Credit card debt can get expensive if you don't pay it off every month, but if you do, there are more frequent flyer miles and other rewards than ever to capitalize on. Carrying a low interest rate mortgage can be a smart move because it allows you to invest more for your retirement and other long-term goals, although paying it off before you retire should be in your long-term plans. And as for 401k, 403b, and other retirement plan loans, avoid them if possible so that your money can grow for your future. But if you have to take one, be careful not to make a habit of it. Fidelity is available for more than just helping you save for retirement. They're there to help you reach your financial goals, whether it's budgeting, managing debt, saving for things like college or a home, or even building an emergency fund. Fidelity can help you with your overall financial plan. With regards to debt, here are a few things that you can do today. The My Money Checkup tool provides a way to evaluate your debt and financial health overall. The Student Debt tool, as we've been saying, helps you figure out the best way to repay your loans. The Loan Calculator can help you evaluate whether or not it makes sense to borrow from your retirement plan or other sources to cover things like PMI. Utilize the resources that are available to you, net benefits or your phone reps. And there's no charge to call or meet with a rep. Your employer offers you this service free as part of your retirement savings plan. Thank you to all of our viewers for spending this time with us to think about your own financial situation and wise uses and solutions for better managing your debt. We hope you gained a lot of good information and will access the resources that we mentioned today. And thanks again for being here.